Hello, hello again. All right, so we are streaming on the Recasting the Movies YouTube channel. There's currently no one in the room. I'm not seeing anyone in the background. I'm going to turn off my camera. Jordan, Mr. Darcy, if you could turn on your camera so I can make sure people can see you, that would be great.
Cameras on.
Awesome. Snaps. I can see you. Fabulous. You're in this thing. Mr. Darcy, we love to see it. Oh, look at you. Your background is gorgeous. Chef kiss. Okay. So okay. Oh, and I see you too. I I see Erica just now, and then you were gone. There you are, Erica. Hi, can you please change your name, Erica, to Jane Bennet?
We're not live, though, right?
We are live.
But like, are we live with guests in the house or just live?
No guests in the house except for someone who randomly found us. Hey, random stranger. We had some technical difficulties, but we will be back.
Well, Bingley, would you mind dropping? Or I guess if I put something in the chat, does the stream see it? Do you know, Clara? I'm just thinking it'd be good if you and I had the same background.
I
Uh,
can. You want me to like? You want me to I'll shoot you my email. I'll like DM you my email.
or you could just drop the link in the DM. Either's good.
All right, Cass, it seems like we are back on track and technology has not whipped our butts just yet. Get back into character, make sure you're named properly, and we are going to jump right back into it. As soon as I send this email, Carly will start again.
You may want to give it a minute for people to get the email.
That is some impressive typing there.
Sorry, that
I'd
was
say
me.
that's 90 words a minute, that one.
Wait, I heard that was funny.
All right, everyone, we are live again. So here we go. And we're going to wait just a couple minutes for everyone to get the email we just sent.
Welcome to Pride and Prejudice by Kaela Mei-Shing Garvin. Netherfield is let at last. A middle-class English drawing room. The Bennets are arranged throughout it in a classic tableau as if they are a painting. Mr. Bennet frowns over his letters. Mrs. Bennet is perched above him, smoothing his hair as he swats her away. Jane is trimming her hat. Lizzie is reading a tattered book. Mary is seated at the piano, mid-caterwaul. Kitty and Lydia are fighting over ribbons.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
The Bennets break their tableau, coming animated. Mary plays the piano and sings badly.
My dear Mr. Bennet, have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?
I'll sing you 12.
Mr. Bennet?
Give that to me.
Those are my ribbons. I bought them myself.
You've stolen it. I know that's my ribbon.
Mr. Bennet?
It's mine.
It's mine.
Mr. Bennet, why do you not answer me?
Moment's peace, that's all I ask.
In this house, Father.
Netherfield Park is let. Have you heard? Mrs. Long has just been here and she told me all about it.
I'll rip your hair out.
I'll pluck your eyelashes.
Do you not want to know who has taken Netherfield Park?
You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it.
Well, my dear, you must know. Mrs. Long says that Netherfield Park is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England.
A young man?
Of large fortune?
What is his name?
Bingley.
Is he married or single?
Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. Oh, what a fine thing for our girls.
How so?
Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I'm thinking of his marrying one of them.
One of us?
Is that his design in settling here? Marriage?
Design? Nonsense. How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of our daughters, and therefore you must visit him.
Yeah. I see no occasion for that.
Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves.
I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with some consideration these past 20 years.
Oh, you do not know what I suffer.
But I hope you will get over it and live to see many a young man of 4,000 a year move into the neighborhood.
It would be no use to us if 20 such should come, since you will not visit them.
What is that you work on? I hope Mr. Bingley will like it, Jane.
We are not in a way to know what Mr. Bingley likes, since you won't visit him.
But you forget, Mamma, that we shall meet him at the assemblies, and Mrs. Long promised to introduce him.
I do not believe Mrs. Long will do any such thing. She has 2 nieces of her own, and she is a very selfish, hypocritical woman, and I have no opinion of her. Oh, don't keep coughing so, Kitty. For heaven's sake, have a little compassion on my nerves. You just tear them to pieces.
Kitty has no discretion in her coughs. She times them ill.
I do not cough for my own amusement.
When is your next ball to be, Lizzie?
Tomorrow fortnight.
Ay, and Mrs. Long does not come back till the day before, so it will be impossible for her to introduce him, for she will not know him herself.
Well, then, my dear, you may have the advantage and introduce Mr. Bingley to her.
Impossible. Mr. Bennet, impossible. When I'm not acquainted with him myself, how can you be so teasing?
What do you say, Mary? You are a young lady of deep reflection and read great books and make extracts. Well, Well, Mary's adjusting her ideas. Let us return to Mr. Bingley.
Oh, I'm sick of Mr. Bingley.
Oh, sorry to hear that, but why did you not tell me that before? If I'd known as much this morning, I certainly would not have called upon him.
The room erupts.
You didn't?
You already met him.
Oh,
Let him answer. Let him answer.
but I knew I should persuade you at last. I was sure you loved your girls too well to neglect such an acquaintance. Oh, how pleased I am. And it is such a good joke, too, that you should have gone this morning and never said a word about it until now.
Now, Kitty, you may cough as much as you wish.
What an excellent father you have, girls. At our time of life, it is just not so pleasant. I can tell you to be making new acquaintances every day, but for your sakes, we would do anything. Lydia, my love, you are the youngest. I dare say Mr. Bingley will dance with you at the next ball.
Oh, I'm not afraid, for although I am the youngest, I'm the tallest.
You are not.
I'm two.
Oh, if I could just see but one of my daughters happily settled at Netherfield and all the others equally well married, I shall have nothing else to wish for.
What are your 12 more, and 12 apostles?
The first ball, a sea of dancers. Lively music. The company dances a gavotte. The crowd parts to reveal Mr. Bingley, Mr. Darcy, and Caroline Bingley. Lizzie pulls Charlotte Lucas out of the crowd.
Charlotte, you've arrived at last.
Careful, Lizzie, you block my view.
Of what?
That's Mr. Bingley there and his sister Caroline.
And who's that near Mr. Bingley, the one with the surly countenance?
I find him rather dashing.
Who is he? What is his name?
Him? Why, that's Mr. Darcy.
Mr. Darcy.
I hear he has £20,000 a year.
20,000? What does he do with it, do you suppose?
I cannot fathom.
He must be in possession of at least 2 residences. Do you think he'll be at Netherfield long?
Oh, Lizzie, look. Mr. Bingley is asking Jane to dance.
It's true. Mr. Bingley takes Jane's hand. Mr. Darcy remains by the side of the room, surly.
They look well together, don't they?
Quite well. Have you danced yet tonight?
I've been obliged to sit due to the scarcity of men.
You think Mr. Darcy would choose a partner under such dire circumstances?
In the absence of men, we might choose to imbibe.
Let's.
Charlotte and Lizzie head to the punch table. The dancers swirl around them. As the dance ends, Charlotte and Lizzie find themselves near Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy.
Darcy, I must have you dance. I hate seeing you standing alone by yourself in this stupid manner. You'd much better dance.
No, I detest it unless I am acquainted with my partner. Such an assembly as this, it would be insupportable. Your sister is engaged, and there is not another woman in the room whom it would not be a punishment to stand up with.
Oh, upon my honor, I was never met with so many pleasant girls in my life, and several of them uncommonly pretty.
You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room.
Mr. Darcy indicates Jane.
Oh, she's the most beautiful creature I ever beheld. But there is one of her sisters just behind you who is pretty, and I dare say very agreeable. Do let me ask Jane to introduce you.
Which do you mean?
Mr. Bingley indicates Lizzie.
She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. You'd better return to your partner and enjoy her smiles, for you are most certainly wasting your time with me.
Mr. Bingley returns to Jane's side.
I'm sure he did not mean for you to hear him.
Good intentions ought not excuse bad behavior.
My dear Eliza, why are you not dancing? Mr. Darcy, you must allow me to present my daughter to you as a dance partner.
Indeed, sir. I have not the least intention of dancing. Do not suppose I moved this way in order to beg for a partner.
Lizzie!
Would you allow me the honor of your hand?
I'm sorry, Mr. Darcy, I cannot. And I hear you dislike dancing in any case?
Oh, you excel so much in the dance that it is just cruel to deny me the happiness of seeing you. And though this gentleman dislikes the amusement in general, he could have no objection to oblige us for 1/2 hour.
Mr. Darcy is all politeness.
He is indeed. But, my dear Lizzie, we cannot wonder at his complacence. Who would object to such a partner?
I'm sure some might find me merely tolerable.
Mr. Darcy, do you know of what she speaks?
I cannot say that he does. Excuse me.
Jane and Lizzie after the ball. The Bennet house. Lizzie and Jane are alone.
Mr. Bingley is just what a young man ought to be. Sensible, good-humoured, lively, and I never saw such happy manners.
He's also handsome, which a young man ought to be if he possibly can.
I was very much flattered by his asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment.
Compliments always take you by surprise and me never. What could be more natural than his asking you again? He could not help seeing that you were about 5 times as pretty as every other woman in the ballroom. You have liked many a stupider person.
Dear Lizzie.
You are a great deal too apt to like people in general. I've never heard you speak ill of a human being in your life.
But I always speak what I think.
And so you like this man's sister, Caroline, too, do you? Her manners are not equal to his.
I am much mistaken if we should not find a very charming neighbour in her. In fact, she has invited me to visit Netherfield tomorrow, if Mamma will lend me the carriage.
Why, Jane, that's wonderful news. I know Mr. Bingley to be partial to you. Perhaps he might fall even more in love when you come visit.
Mr. Bingley is far from falling in love with me.
I overheard Mr. Robinson asking Mr. Bingley which lady he thought the prettiest. Bingley answered immediately, "Oh, the eldest Miss Bennet, beyond a doubt."
Well, that is very decided indeed. That does seem as if, but however, it may all come to nothing, you know. Mr. Darcy is not so well worth listening to as his friend, is he? Well, Lizzie, to be only just tolerable.
It would be a misfortune to be liked by him. Mrs. Long told me last night that he sat close to her for half an hour without once opening his lips.
Miss Caroline Bingley told me that he never speaks much unless among his intimate acquaintances. With them, he is remarkably agreeable.
If he had been so very agreeable, he would have talked to Mrs. Long.
I do not mind his talking to Mrs. Long, but I wish he had danced with you.
I can safely promise you never to dance with him.
His pride does not offend me so much because there is an excuse for it. One cannot wonder that so very fine a young man with family, fortune, everything in his favor, should think highly of himself.
I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine. If I were as rich as Mr. Darcy, I should not care how proud I was. I would keep a pack of foxhounds and drink a bottle of wine a day.
You wouldn't drink a great deal more than you ought. I should take away your bottle directly.
You ought not to seem prudish when you visit the Bingleys, my dear sister. They seem a lively sort.
I shall do my very best.
Mamma shan't lend you the carriage. I'm sure of it. It looks like rain.
Lizzie visits a sick Jane at Netherfield. Netherfield drawing room.
Lizzie Bennet has nothing, in short, to recommend her but being an excellent walker. I shall never forget her appearance this morning. She really looked almost wild. Why must she be scampering about the country because her sister had a cold? Her hair so untidy, so blousy. I hope you saw her petticoat, 6 inches deep in mud.
Well, I thought Miss Bennet looked well when we ran into her this morning. Her petticoat quite escaped my notice.
You observed it, Mr. Darcy, and I'm inclined to think you would not wish to see your sister make such an exhibition.
Certainly not.
To walk 3 miles, or 4 miles, or 5 miles, or whatever it is, above her ankles in dirt, and alone, quite alone. What could she mean by it? It seems to me to show an abominable sort of conceited independence, a most country town indifference to decorum.
It shows an affection for her sister. That is very pleasing.
I have an excessive regard for Miss Jane Bennet. She is really a very sweet girl, and I wish with all my heart that she were well settled. But with such a father and mother and such low connections, I'm afraid there is no chance of it.
I think I've heard you say that their uncle is an attorney in Meryton.
Yes, and they have another who lives somewhere near Cheapside.
If they had uncles enough to fill all of Cheapside, it would not make them one jot less agreeable.
But it must lessen their chance of marrying men of any consideration in the world.
Lizzie enters, petticoat caked in mud, carrying a book.
Do you prefer reading to cards? That is rather singular.
Miss Lizzie Bennet despises cards. She is a great reader and has no pleasure in anything else.
I'm not a great reader, and I have pleasure in many things.
Nursing your sister, I'm sure you have pleasure. And I wish my library were larger for your benefit, but I'm an idle fellow.
I am astonished that her father has left so small a collection of books. What a delightful library you have at Pemberley, Mr. Darcy.
To be good, it has been the work of many generations.
And then you have added so much to it yourself. You are always buying books.
I cannot comprehend the neglect of a family library in such days as these.
Charles, when you build your house, I wish it may be half as delightful as Pemberley. But I really would advise that you make your purchase in that neighborhood and take Pemberley for a kind of model.
With all my heart, I will buy Pemberley itself if Darcy will sell it.
I'm talking of possibilities, Charles.
I should think it more possible to get Pemberley by purchase than by imitation.
Lizzie draws near the card table.
By the by, Charles, are you really serious about hosting a dance at Netherfield?
It is quite a settled thing.
Ugh, I should like balls infinitely better if they were entirely different. It'd be much more rational if conversation instead of dancing were the order of the day.
Much more rational, my dear Caroline. I dare say, but less like a ball.
Caroline stands to do a lap around the room.
Miss Bennet, let me persuade you to take a turn about the room. I assure you it's very refreshing after sitting so long in one attitude.
Of course.
Mr. Darcy looks up.
Do you wish to join us, Mr. Darcy?
Certainly not. I can imagine but two motives for your walking, and by joining I would only interfere.
Can you understand him, Lizzie?
Not at all. But our surest way of disappointing him will be to ask nothing about it.
My dear Mr. Darcy, what can you mean?
Well, if you either are in each other's confidence and have secret affairs to discuss, or you are conscious that your figures appear to the greatest advantage in walking. The first, I would be completely in your way, and if the second, I can admire you much better as I sit by the fire.
Oh, shocking. How shall we punish him for such a speech?
Tease him, laugh at him. Intimate as you are, you must know how it is to be done.
Mr. Darcy does not like to be laughed at.
That's a disappointment. I dearly love a laugh.
Are you writing your sister, Mr. Darcy?
Is Miss Darcy much grown since this spring? Will she be as tall as I am?
She will. She is now about Miss Elizabeth Bennet's height, or rather taller.
Oh, I have never met with anybody who delighted me so much. Such a countenance, such manners, and so extremely accomplished for her age. Her performance on the pianoforte is exquisite.
It is amazing to me how young ladies can have patience to be so accomplished as they are.
My dear Charles, what do you mean?
Oh, they paint tables, cover screens, and net purses. I never heard of a lady spoken of without being informed that she was very accomplished.
I cannot boast of knowing more than a half a dozen that are really accomplished.
Nor I.
Then you must comprehend a great deal in your idea of an accomplished woman.
I do comprehend a great deal in it.
A woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word. And besides all this, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, or the word will be but half deserved.
And to all this, she must yet add something more substantial, in the improvement of her mind by extensive reading.
I am no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I rather wonder at your now knowing any.
Are you so severe upon your own sex?
I never saw such a woman.
Elizabeth Bennet is one of those young ladies who seek to recommend themselves to the other sex by undervaluing their own. And with many men, I dare say, it succeeds. But in my opinion, it is a very mean art.
Visitor to the Bennet house. The Bennet Residence.
I hope, my dear, that you have ordered a good dinner today, for I have reason to expect an addition to our family party.
What do you mean, my dear? I know of nobody that is coming, I'm sure, unless Charlotte Lucas should happen to call in. Oh, and I hope my dinners are good enough for her. I do believe she often sees people at her home.
The person of whom I speak is a gentleman and a stranger.
A gentleman and a stranger? Oh, it is Mr. Bingley, I'm sure. Well, I'm sure I shall be extremely glad to see Mr. Bingley. But good Lord, how unlucky. There's not a bit of fish to be got today.
It is not Mr. Bingley. It is a person whom I never saw before in the entire course of my life.
Well, who, Mr. Bennet?
Strange gentleman.
He learned.
He tall?
Has he money?
Is he handsome?
Peace, girls, peace. It is my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, when I am dead, may turn you all out of this house as soon as he pleases.
Oh, my dear, I cannot bear to hear that odious man mentioned. I do think it is the hardest thing in the world that your estate should be entailed away from your own children.
It is certainly a most iniquitous affair. Nothing can clear Mr. Collins from the guilt of inheriting Longbourn. But if you will listen to his letter, you may perhaps be a little softened by his manner of expressing himself.
I'm sure I shall not. It is very impertinent of him to write you at all, and very hypocritical. I hate such false friends.
He wishes to make our acquaintance, and perhaps more seriously, he wishes to make the acquaintance of our daughters, with an eye toward marriage.
Marriage?
Marriage?
Marriage.
Marriage?
At 4 o'clock, therefore, we may expect this peacemaking gentleman.
Oh, there is some sense in what he says about the girls. However, and if he is disposed to make them any amends, I shall not be the person to discourage him.
Could he be a sensible man, sir?
Oh, my dear, I think not. I have great hopes of finding him quite the reverse.
The table is set, and the Bennets all take their seats. Mr. Collins enters and sits among them.
Delightful arrangement you have here. My patroness, Lady Catherine, always says, it is not the size of the bounty, but the company around it that matters. And what excellent company.
I dare say Lady Catherine is a very agreeable woman. Does she live near you, sir?
The garden in which stands my humble abode is separated only by a lane from Rosings Park, her ladyship's residence. She has one daughter, the heiress of Rosings, and a very extensive property.
Ah, then she's better off than many girls.
Is she handsome?
She is unfortunately of a sickly constitution, but she is perfectly amiable and often condescends to drive by my humble abode in her little phaeton and ponies.
Has she be presented? I do not remember her name among the ladies at court.
Her state of health unhappily prevents her being in town by that means. As I told Lady Catherine one day, she has deprived the British court of its brightest ornament.
Oh, what a sentiment.
I am happy on every occasion to offer those little delicate compliments which are always acceptable to the ladies.
It is happy for you to possess the talent of flattering with delicacy.
Do these pleasing attentions proceed from the impulse of the moment, or are they the result of previous study?
They arise chiefly from what is passing at the time, and though I sometimes amuse myself with suggesting and arranging such little elegant compliments, I always wish to give them as unstudied an air as possible.
Ladies love a man in uniform. Meryton, the town nearest Longbourn. Lydia, Kitty, Jane, Mary, and Lizzie enter from a shopping trip.
It seems like the soldiers will be here forever.
If only they would be.
Come now, Mary, don't you have your eye on anyone?
Music is my suitor.
The only music for me is a man's voice.
What about you, Jane?
Jane has eyes for Mr. Bingley alone.
I do not.
You needn't lie, Jane. We all see how you look at him.
His income is considerably more favourable than the soldiers, I'll grant that.
Lizzie, what about you?
The day a soldier turns my head will be a cold one down there.
Down where?
Open your Bible, Mary. Is it not your favorite novel?
Do not joke about the Lord's word.
What about that one?
Which one?
Oh, Lydia, he's perfect.
Which?
The one with the rugged physique.
Angelic face.
Austere build.
He is rather handsome.
You cannot deny it, Lizzie.
Nay, I cannot. He dashing indeed.
Then let me call him over here.
And how do you propose to do that?
I shall sing to him.
Mary, no.
Oh, sir, kind sir, can you retrieve my handkerchief? Thank you for your courtesy.
Any time.
Are you stationed here with the regiment in town? Then you simply must meet my sisters. I'm the youngest, though you would never know it. Then there's Kitty. She steals everything I own. Then Mary. She likes solitude. Our dear smart Lizzie. And then Jane. She's the eldest and very nearly married.
Lydia, don't tell falsehoods.
It's not a falsehood if it's nearly true.
Pleased to make your acquaintance, ladies.
The pleasure's all ours, I'm sure.
We were thinking of walking home soon. Do you have any engagements?
I love walking. I'd be happy to attend you.
Do you hear that, Lizzie? He loves walking.
A family is nothing if not the paramount of subtlety, Mr. Wickham.
I'd be happy to walk with any and all of you, especially Miss Lizzie.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bingley.
As a matter of fact, we were just on our way to Longbourn to inquire after you, Miss Jane.
Oh, how kind of you.
Darcy looks at Elizabeth longingly. His eyes come to rest on her hand, entwined with Wickham's. His eyes travel up Wickham's arm to his face.
Whatever is the matter with Mr. Darcy?
I'll tell you if you dine with me.
I never dine out. Mamma doesn't allow it.
Then perhaps I could dine at your residence.
Oh, Mamma would be delighted, I'm sure.
Another man to join us for supper.
Wickham dines with the Bennets. Mr. Wickham and Mr. Collins join the Bennets for supper.
How long has Mr. Darcy been in town?
Out a month. He's a man of very large property in Derbyshire, I understand.
His estate there is a noble one, a clear 10,000 per year. I've been connected with his family from my infancy.
Truly.
You may well be surprised, Miss Bennet, at such an assertion. Are you much acquainted with Mr. Darcy?
I have spent time in the same house with him, and I think him very disagreeable. He is not at all liked in Hertfordshire.
I wonder whether he is likely to be in this country much longer.
I do not at all know, but I heard nothing of his going away when I was at Netherfield. I hope your plans will not be affected by his being in the neighbourhood.
No, it is not for me to be driven away by Mr. Darcy. If he wishes to avoid seeing me, he must go. A military life is not what I was intended for. The church ought to have been my profession. I was brought up for the church, and I should at this time have been in the possession of a most valuable living, had it pleased Mr. Darcy.
Indeed?
The late Mr. Darcy was my godfather and excessively attached to me. He meant to provide for me amply and thought he had done it. But when the living fell, it was given elsewhere.
Good heavens! How could his will be disregarded? Why did you not seek legal redress?
There was just such an informality in the terms of the bequest as to give me no hope from the law. A man of honour could not have doubted the intention, but Mr. Darcy chose to doubt it.
He deserves to be publicly disgraced.
Sometime or other he will be, but it shall not be by me. Till I can forget his father, I can never defy or expose him.
What can have induced him to behave so cruelly?
Jealousy. Had the late Mr. Darcy liked me less, his son might have borne with me better.
I had not thought Mr. Darcy so bad as this.
We were born in the same parish, within the same park. The greatest part of our youth was passed together, inmates of the same house, sharing the same amusements, objects of the same parental care.
What sort of girl is his sister, Miss Darcy?
I wish I could call her amiable, but she is too much like a brother. Very, very proud. As a child, she was affectionate and pleasing and extremely fond of me, and I have devoted hours and hours to her amusement. But she is nothing to me now.
How can Mr. Bingley, who seems good humour itself, be in friendship with Mr. Darcy? Do you know Mr. Bingley?
Not all.
He's a sweet-tempered, amiable, charming man. He cannot know what Mr. Darcy is.
Happily, I am not in such circumstance as to make 5 shillings any object. Thanks to Lady Catherine de Bourgh, I am removed far beyond the necessity of regarding little matters.
How fortunate of you. Mr. Wickham, are you well? Do you require more wine?
No, sir. I find I'm intoxicated by my present company.
Well then.
Is Mr. Collins very acquainted with the family of de Bourgh?
Lady Catherine de Bourgh has very lately given him a living. I hardly know how Mr. Collins was first introduced to her notice, but he certainly has not known her long.
You know, of course, that Lady Catherine de Bourgh and Lady Anne Darcy were sisters. Consequently, she is the aunt to the present Mr. Darcy.
I know nothing at all of Lady Catherine's connections. I never heard of her existence till the day before yesterday.
Her daughter, Miss de Bourgh, will have a very large fortune.
The one with the poor constitution.
Indeed, it is believed that she and Mr. Darcy will unite the two estates through marriage.
The ball at Netherfield. Lights twinkle all over the ballroom. Bingley has made good on his promise to host a ball. Everyone is beautifully dressed. Rows of dancers populate the room. Lizzie and Darcy are dancing.
It is your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy. I talked about the dance, and you ought to make some sort of remark on the size of the room or the number of couples.
Whatever you wish me to say should be said.
Perhaps by and by I may observe that private balls are much pleasanter than public ones.
Do you talk by rule, then, while you are dancing?
Sometimes. It would look odd to be entirely silent for half an hour, and yet, for the advantage of some, conversation ought to be arranged as that they may say as little as possible.
Are you consulting your own feelings, or do you imagine you are gratifying mine?
Both. We are each of an unsocial, taciturn disposition, unwilling to speak unless we expect to say something that we expect to say amaze the whole room and be handed down to posterity as proverb.
This is no very striking resemblance of your own character. How near may be to mine, I cannot pretend to say. Do you often walk to Meryton?
On occasion. When you met us there the other day, we had just been forming a new acquaintance.
Mr. Wickham is blessed with such happy manners as may ensure his making friends. Whether he is equally capable of retaining them is less certain.
He has been so unlucky as to lose your friendship, and in a manner which he is likely to suffer from all his life.
What think you of books?
I'm sure we never read the same, and not with the same feelings.
I I'm sorry you think so, but if that be the case, there can at least be no want of subject. We may compare our different opinions.
I cannot talk of books in a ballroom. My head is always so full of something else.
The present always occupies you in such scenes, does it?
I'm merely trying to make you out. I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as puzzle me exceedingly.
I wish you would not.
But if I do not take your likeness now, I may never have another opportunity.
I would by no means suspend any pleasure of yours.
So, Miss Eliza, I hear you're quite delighted with George Wickham, Mr. Darcy's former steward. Let me recommend you, however, as a friend, not to give confidence to all his assertions. I do not know the particulars, but I know very well that Mr. Darcy is not in the least to blame. I pity you, Miss Eliza, for this discovery of your favourite's guilt. But really, one could not expect much better.
I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than being the son of Mr. Darcy's steward, and of that, I can assure you, he informed me himself.
Excuse my interference. It was kindly meant.
Oh, Jane, thank goodness. Mr. Wickham is nowhere to be found, and I've just had a frightful encounter with... Never mind.
I've only been dancing with Mr. Bingley just over there.
I want to know what you have learnt about Mr. Wickham, but perhaps you have been too pleasantly engaged with Mr. Bingley to think of any third person.
I have nothing satisfactory to tell you.
Really?
Mr. Bingley does not know the whole of his history, but he will vouch that Mr. Wickham is by no means a respectable young man.
Mr. Bingley does not know Mr. Wickham himself.
You never saw him till the other morning at Meryton.
Well, then, how can he have such strong views?
From Mr. Darcy, I suppose.
And how have you found Mr. Bingley?
Oh, he's marvellous, Lizzie.
I have found out, by a singular accident, that there is now in the room a near relation of my patroness. How wonderfully these sort of things occur.
You are not going to introduce yourself to Mr. Darcy.
Indeed I am. I shall entreat his pardon for not having done it earlier. I believe him to be Lady Catherine's nephew.
I do not think that wise, Mr. Collins.
Nonsense, nonsense.
He will think it impertinent.
Pardon me for neglecting your advice, which on every other subject shall be my constant guide. I am more fitted by education and habitual study to decide on what is right than a young lady like yourself.
Oh no, Lizzie. He's approaching Mr. Darcy now.
I wish I had a better view.
Oh, I can't look.
I assure you it's quite fascinating.
Does he look angry?
Fuming in his quiet way.
What is he saying?
Shh, shh. Mr. Collins is returning.
Mr. Darcy seemed much pleased with my attentions. You see, ladies, sometimes a gentleman knows best.
Mrs. Bennet enters, making a beeline for Mr. Collins. Lizzie steps off to the side and listens.
Oh, Mr. Collins, what a good fortune. I was just discussing the fate of our daughters, and I thought you might have some insight. We do expect a match for our Jane soon with Mr. Bingley. He is such a charming young man, and so rich and lives but 3 miles away.
Charming, charming, yes.
Mr. Darcy enters, standing rather close to the group, evidently able to overhear.
Mamma, I think you might.
And it is such a comfort to think how fond Caroline Bingley is of Jane, and to be certain that she must desire the connection as much as we do.
Ah, of course.
Mary enters. She sits at the piano, plays and sings a song quite badly.
Are you not mistaken, Mamma?
And it is moreover such a promising thing for my younger daughters as Jane's marrying so greatly must throw them in the way of other rich men.
I suppose so.
Mamma?
It really is pleasant at my time of life to consign my single daughters to Jane's care. So I oughtn't leave the house. I do hate to leave the house. I hope Charlotte Lucas might soon be equally fortunate as my Jane. Though, Charlotte is rather plain.
Really, Mamma, you might be more prudent.
What is Mr. Darcy to me? pray that I should be afraid of him? Now, Mr. Collins, I must introduce you to Lady Lucas.
Mary begins a new song. Again, it is bad.
The lark in the morning hours it from her nest and mounts in the air with the dew on her breast. With a pretty ploughboy she'll whistle and sing, and at night she'll return to her nest again. When his day's work is done, that he has work to do, perhaps to some country wake he will go, there with his sweetheart he will dance and sing, and at midnight return with his lass back again.
As Mary is about to begin a third verse, Mr. Bennet enters.
That will do, child. You have delighted us long enough. And let the other young ladies have time to exhibit.
The lark in the morning hours it from her nest and mounts in the air with the dew on her breast. With a pretty ploughboy she'll whistle and sing, and at night she'll return to her nest again.
Yes.
If I were so fortunate as to be able to sing, I should have great pleasure in obliging the company with an air, for I consider music as a very innocent diversion and perfectly compatible with the profession of a clergyman. I do not mean, however, to assert that we can be justified in devoting too much of our life to music. The rector of a parish has much to do.
What a remarkably clever, good kind of young man.
An unwelcome proposal. The Bennet house.
May I hope, madam, for a private audience with your fair daughter Elizabeth in the course of this morning?
Oh,
Oh dear, yes, certainly. I'm sure Lizzie will be very happy. I'm sure she can have no objection. Come, Kitty, I want you upstairs.
Dear madame, do not go. I beg you will not go. Mr. Collins must excuse me. He can have nothing to say that anybody need not hear. I'm going away myself.
Nonsense, Lizzie. I desire you stay where you are.
Please, Mama.
Lizzie, I insist upon you staying and hearing Mr. Collins. Come, Jane.
Believe me, my dear Elizabeth, that your modesty, so far from doing you any disservice, rather adds to your other perfections. Almost as soon as I entered the house, I singled you out as the companion of my future life. Before I am run away with by my feelings on this subject, perhaps it would be advisable for me to state my reasons for marrying.
I do not find that necessary.
My reasons for marrying are, first, that I think it a right thing for every clergyman to set the example of matrimony in his parish. Secondly, that I'm convinced that it will add very greatly to my happiness. And thirdly, which perhaps I ought to have mentioned earlier, that is the particular advice and recommendation of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Thus, much for my general intention in favor of matrimony. It remains to be told why my views were directed here instead of my own neighborhood, where I can assure you there were many amiable young women.
Mr. Collins.
Being as I am to inherit this estate after the death of your honored father, I could not satisfy myself without resolving to choose a wife from among his daughters. And now nothing remains for me but to assure you in the most animated language of the violence of my affection.
You forget that I have not made an answer. I'm very honored by your proposals, but it is impossible for me to do otherwise than to decline them.
It is usual with young ladies to reject the addresses of the man whom they secretly mean to accept. I am therefore by no means discouraged by what you've just said, and shall hope to lead you to the altar ere long.
I'm not one of those young ladies. I'm perfectly serious in my refusal. You could not make me happy, and I'm convinced that I am the last woman in the world who could make you so.
Let me now speak in the very highest terms of your modesty, economy, and other amiable qualifications.
All praise of me will be unnecessary. Instead, pay me the compliment of believing what I say. I wish you very happy and very rich, and by refusing your hand, do all in my power to prevent your being otherwise.
When I do myself the honor of speaking to you next on the subject, I shall hope to receive a more favorable answer than you have given me now. I know it to be the established custom of your sex to reject at first.
Really, Mr. Collins?
It does not appear to me that my hand is unworthy of your acceptance, or that the establishment I can offer would be any other than highly desirable. Your portion is unhappily so small that it will in all likelihood undo the effects of your loveliness and amiable qualifications. As I must therefore conclude that you are not serious in your rejection of me, I shall choose to attribute it to your wish of increasing my love by suspense, according to the usual practice of elegant females.
I have no pretensions to that kind of elegance which consists in tormenting a respectable man. Can I speak plainer?
You are uniformly charming.
Well, are the nuptial bells to ring?
I have declined his kind offer, Mamma.
What, Lizzie? Have you lost your mind?
No, Mamma.
Take it back, Lizzie. Take it back this instant.
I cannot.
Depend on it, Mr. Collins, that Lizzie, she'll be brought to reason. She's a very headstrong, foolish girl and does not know her own interests, and I will make her know it.
If she is really headstrong and foolish, I know not whether she would altogether be a very desirable wife to a man in my situation.
Oh, Lizzie is only headstrong in such matters as these. In everything else, she is good-natured as a girl that has ever lived. I will go directly to Mr. Bennet, and we will very soon settle it with her. I'm sure. Mr. Bennet, Mr. Bennet.
What is all this racket?
Mr. Bennet, you must come and make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins, for she vows she will not have him. If you do not make haste, he will change his mind and not have her.
Of what are we talking?
Of Mr. Collins and Lizzie. Lizzie declares she will not have Mr. Collins, and Mr. Collins begins to say that he will not have Lizzie.
And what am I to do about it?
Well, speak to Lizzie about it yourself. Tell her that you insist upon her marrying him.
Let it be called down. She shall hear my opinion.
Lizzie!
Come here, child. I understand Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage. Is this true?
Yes, sir.
And this offer of marriage you have refused?
I have, sir.
But your mother insists upon you accepting him. Is it not so, Mrs. Bennet?
Yes, or I will never see her again.
An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. From this day forth, you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, whereas I shall never see you again if you do.
What do you mean, Mr. Bennet, in talking this way? Oh, but I tell you, Miss Lizzie, if you go on refusing every offer of marriage in this way, you will never get a husband at all. I do not know who is to maintain you when your father is dead.
Ah, but I'm not dead yet, lady.
I have no pleasure in talking to undutiful husbands. Not that I have much pleasure indeed in talking to anybody. People who suffer as I do from nervous complaints can have no inclination for talking. Oh, nobody can tell what I suffer, but it is always so. Those who do not complain are never pitied. Come, Mr. Bennet.
Everyone has big news. The Bennet house. Later.
You ought to have seen the look on his face, Jane. I nearly burst out laughing.
Lizzie.
I could not have married him, dear sister.
I know. There is more news yet.
It arrived today.
This is from Caroline Bingley. The whole party have left Netherfield.
Mr. Bingley, too.
Mr. Bingley, too.
I do not pretend to regret anything that I leave in Hertfordshire, except your society, my friend. In the meanwhile, we may lessen the pain of separation by a very frequent and most unreserved correspondence. I depend on you for that. I do not trust her words.
Caroline Bingley is my friend.
You did not hear her at Netherfield while you were ill.
And you did not hear her at Netherfield while I was well.
Perhaps the next time you two meet, it shall be as sisters? Will Mr. Bingley not return to Netherfield?
No,
Not at all.
you may read it in the letter. He comes back no more this winter.
It is only evident that Caroline does not mean that he should.
Why will you think so? It must be his own doing. He is his own master. But you do not know all. Caroline thinks Mr. Bingley will marry Mr. Darcy's sister, Georgiana. You may read it here. Is it not clear enough? Caroline neither expects nor wishes me to be her sister. Can there be any other opinion on the subject?
Yes, there can, for mine is totally different. Will you hear it?
Of course.
Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you and wants him to marry Miss Darcy. She follows him to town in hope of keeping him there and tries to persuade you that he does not care about you.
I think you are mistaken.
No one who has ever seen you two together can doubt his affection. Caroline, I'm sure, cannot. Could she have seen half as much love in Mr. Darcy for herself, she would have ordered her wedding clothes. But the case is this: we are not rich enough or grand enough for them. Charlotte, we were not expecting you today.
I could not remain at home.
What has happened?
I have become engaged to Mr. Collins.
Engaged to Mr. Collins? Impossible.
Felicitations, Charlotte.
But you cannot be serious about him.
Why are you surprised? Do you think it's incredible that Mr. Collins should be able to procure any woman's hand because he did not succeed with you?
I am sorry. I wish you every happiness.
We both do.
You must be surprised, very much surprised, so lately as Mr. Collins was wishing to marry you. I'm not romantic, you know. I never was. I ask only a comfortable home.
I'm sure he will provide that for you.
I shall depend on hearing from you very often, Lizzie.
That you certainly shall.
And I have another favour to ask you. Will you come and see me?
We shall often meet, I'm sure, in Hertfordshire.
I'm not likely to leave Kent for some time. Promise me to come to Hunsford.
I promise.
It is very hard to think that Charlotte Lucas should ever be mistress of this house, that I should be forced to make way for her, to live to see her take her place in it.
My dear, let us not give way to such gloomy thoughts. Let us flatter ourselves that I may be the survivor.
I cannot bear to think that they should have all this estate. And she, so plain. But perhaps Mr. Bingley shall return to Netherfield, and perhaps we might be saved after all.
So, Lizzie, your sister's crossed in love, I find. Next to being married, a girl likes to be crossed in love now and then. Something to think of. Gives her a sort of distinction among her companions. Let Wickham be your man. He's a pleasant fellow, and he will jilt you creditably.
Thank you, sir, but a less agreeable man would satisfy me. We must not all expect Jane's good fortune.
True, but it is a comfort to think that whatever of that kind may befall you, you have an affectionate mother who will make the most of it.
My nerves, have compassion on my nerves. Write to Mr. Bingley, will you, Jane? Tell him to return within the fortnight.
Oh, that my dear mother had more command over herself. She can have no idea of the pain she gives me by her continual reminders of him. But it cannot last long. He will be forgot, and we shall all be as we were before. You doubt me, but you have no reason. He may live in my memory as the most amiable man of my acquaintance, but that is all. It has done no harm to anyone but myself.
My dear Jane, you are too good.
No, 'tis you who are the better sister.
There are few people whom I really love, and still fewer of whom I think well. The more I see of the world, the more am I dissatisfied with it. Every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human characters.
My dear Lizzie, do not give way to such feelings as these. They will ruin your happiness.
Mr. Collins is a conceited, pompous, narrow-minded, silly man. You know he is as well as I do, and you must feel as well as I do that the woman who marries him cannot have a proper way of thinking.
I must think your language too strong in speaking of them, and I hope you will be convinced of it by seeing them happy together.
Perhaps you ought to go to London, Jane. Chase after Mr. Bingley.
Perhaps you ought to mind your own business. Have you not spoken with Mr. Wickham of late?
I have not seen him in a fortnight.
And? Do you miss him?
Of course.
An invitation to dinner.
My dearest Jane, I hope you are having a lovely time. In London, I have taken it upon myself to visit Charlotte, the new Mrs. Collins, and our cousin Mr. Collins at their humble abode. I find the countryside quite diverting. Tonight we shall dine with Lady Catherine de Bourgh. I sincerely hope I shall survive the meeting. Yours,
Lizzie, Mr. Collins, and Charlotte stand in the vestibule at Rosings Park, Lady Catherine's grand home.
I should not have been at all surprised by her ladyship's asking us on Sunday to drink tea and spend the evening at Rosings. But who could have imagined that we should receive an invitation to dine there so immediately after your arrival? Do not make yourself uneasy, my dear cousin, about your apparel. Lady Catherine will not think the worse of you for being simply dressed.
They walk into the grand hall. Lady Catherine stands at the end of a large table, arrayed in ostentatious finery. The newcomers bow, then sit. They sip wine and eat.
Do you play and sing, Miss Bennet?
A little.
Sometime or other we shall be happy to hear you. Our instrument's a capital one, probably superior to... You shall try it someday. Do your sisters play and sing?
One of them does.
Why did you not all learn? You ought all to have learned. Do you draw?
No, not at all.
What? None of you?
Not one?
That is very strange. But I suppose you had no opportunity. Your mother should have taken you to town every spring.
My mother would have had no objection, but my father hates London.
Has your governess left you?
We never had a governess.
No governess? How is that possible? 5 daughters brought up at a home without a governess? I never heard of such a thing. Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education.
That wasn't the case.
Then who taught you? Who attended to you?
We were always encouraged to read. Those who chose to be idle certainly might.
I always say that nothing is to be done in education without steady and regular instruction, and nobody but a governess can give it. Are any of your younger sisters out in society, Miss Bennet?
Yes, ma'am, all.
All? What? All 5 out at once? Very odd. And you only the second. The younger ones out before the elder ones are married. Your younger sisters must be very young.
Yes, my youngest is not 16. I think it would be very hard upon younger sisters that they should not have their share of society and amusement. It would not be very likely to promote sisterly affection.
On my word, you give your opinion very decidedly for so young a person. Pray, what is your age?
With 3 younger sisters grown up, your ladyship can hardly expect me to own it.
You cannot be more than 20, I'm sure. Therefore, you need not conceal your age. Oh, my dear nephew.
Mr. Darcy.
I had the pleasure of making Mr. Darcy's acquaintance at the Netherfield ball.
You quitted Netherfield shortly after, did you not, Mr. Darcy?
Indeed, the entire party left Netherfield soon after the ball.
And you've been in London?
Yes, ma'am, that I have.
My eldest sister has been in town these 3 months. Have you ever happened to see her there?
No.
That is odd.
Why don't we have some music?
Oh, wonderful.
That would be an indisputable delight.
There are few people in England who have more true enjoyment of music than myself, or better taste. If I had ever learned, I should have been a great proficient, and so would my daughter Anne, if her health had allowed her to apply. I am confident she would have performed delightfully. How does Georgiana get on, Darcy?
Quite well, thank you, ma'am.
Pray tell her from me that she cannot expect to excel if she does not practice a good deal.
I assure you, madam, that she does not need such advice. She practices very constantly.
So much the better. Though Mrs. Collins has no instrument, she's very welcome, as I have often told her to come to Rosings every day and play on the pianoforte in the other wing. She would be in nobody's way in that part of the house. And I have told Miss Bennet several times she will never play really well until she practices more. Miss Bennet, why don't you show us your prowess?
Really, I'm not very skilled.
I insist.
Lizzie crosses reluctantly to the piano. She plays a mediocre tune.
This is why young ladies ought to have a governess.
Mr. Darcy leaves his seat to lean on Lizzie's piano.
You mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy? By coming closer to hear me? I will not be alarmed, though your sister does play so well.
You cannot really believe me to entertain any design of alarming you. I have known you long enough to see that you enjoy professing opinions which are not your own.
Indeed, Mr. Darcy, it is a mistake to mention that you know me well, for it is provoking me to retaliate. Such things may come out as will shock your relations to hear.
I am not afraid of you.
Pray, let me hear what you have to accuse him of. I should like to know how he behaves among strangers.
Prepare yourself for something very dreadful. The first time of my ever seeing him was at a ball. And at this ball, what do you think he did? He danced only 4 dances, though gentlemen were scarce. And, to my certain knowledge, more than one young lady was sitting down in want of a partner. Mr. Darcy, you cannot deny the fact.
I do not know any lady in the assembly beyond my own party.
True, and nobody can ever be introduced in a ballroom. Well, Lady Catherine, what do I play next? My fingers wait your orders.
Not the talent which some people possess of conversing easily with those I have never seen before.
My fingers do not move over this instrument in the masterly manner which I see so many women's do, but I have always thought it to be my own fault. I will not take the trouble of practicing. It is not that I do not believe my fingers as capable as any other woman's.
We neither of us perform to strangers.
Lizzie finishes her song and rejoins the table.
Are you acquainted with Mr. Darcy's good friend, Mr. Bingley?
Oh, yes, we met in Hertfordshire.
I have reason to think Bingley very much indebted to him.
What is it you mean?
It is a circumstance which Darcy could not wish to be generally known, because if it were to get round to the lady's family, it would be an unpleasant thing.
You may depend upon my not mentioning it.
What he told me was merely this, that Darcy congratulated himself on having lately saved a friend from the inconveniences of a most imprudent marriage with a girl named Jane.
Did Mr. Darcy give you reasons for this interference?
I understand there were some very strong objections against the lady.
And what arts did he use to separate them?
Mr. Darcy enters, looking at Lizzie.
He did not talk to me of his own art. He only told me what I have now told you.
Why was he to be the judge?
There were some very strong objections against the lady, in particular against her family.
Mr. Darcy follows her into the vestibule. In the vestibule, Mr. Darcy takes Lizzie's hand as she walks by.
Mr. Darcy?
Jane, I have struggled. It will not do. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you.
What can you mean?
I have done my best to suppress these feelings, as we would make an unlikely match.
I might say as much.
Your family, lack of connections. I know your place is tenuous, and I fought my feelings for you with body and soul. And yet I love you, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, most deeply. I would take your hand if you'll have mine.
If I could feel gratitude, I would now thank you.
I don't understand.
I've never desired your good opinion, and you have certainly bestowed it most unwillingly. The feelings which you tell me have long prevented the acknowledgement of your regard, I'm sure will help you overcome your pain.
And this is all the reply which I am to have the honour of expecting. I might, perhaps, wish to be informed why, with so little endeavour at civility, I am thus rejected.
I might as well inquire why you had so evident a desire of insulting me. You chose to tell me you liked me against your will, against your reason, even against your character.
Is that all?
I have other reason. You know I have. Do you think anything would tempt me to accept the man that has ruined perhaps forever the happiness of a most beloved sister?
Anything which would...
You have been the principal means of dividing them from each other. Mr. Bingley and Jane, can you deny that you have done it?
I have no wish to deny it. I did everything in my power to separate my friend from your sister. Towards him I have been kinder than towards myself.
Long before it had taken place, my opinion of you was decided. Your character was unfolded in the recital which I received many months ago from Mr. Wickham. On this subject, what can you have to say?
An eager interest in that gentleman's concerns.
Who that knows what his misfortunes have been can help feeling an interest in him.
Yes, his misfortunes have been great indeed.
You have withheld the advantages which you must know to have been designed for him. You have deprived the best years of his life of that independence which was no less his due than his desert.
Thank you for explaining it so fully. My faults are heavy indeed. Could you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your connections? To congratulate myself on the hope of relations whose condition in life is so decidedly beneath my own?
You cannot have made the offer of your hand in any possible way that would have tempted me to accept it. From the very beginning, from the first moment of my acquaintance with you, your manners, your conceit, and your selfish disdain of the feelings of others made me dislike you. You are the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry.
You have said quite enough, madam. Forgive me for having taken up so much of your time.
The letter. The Collins house.
Lizzie, a letter's arrived for you. Who is it from?
I do not know the handwriting.
Most strange. I shall ask my husband about the messenger.
Dear Miss Bennet, 2 offences you last night laid to my charge. The first mention was that I had detached Mr. Bingley from your sister, and the other that I had ruined the prospects of Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Darcy appears, penning his letter.
With regard to Mr. Bingley, I can only say that I am sorry. If I have wounded your sister's feelings, it was unknowingly done, and though the motives which governed me may to you appear insufficient, I have not yet learnt to condemn them.
With respect to that other more weighty accusation of having injured Mr. Wickham, it is true we knew each other years ago, and that his father was my father's steward and a favourite.
After my father's death, Wickham was assigned a parsonage, but I knew he did not want to be a clergyman. He resigned all claim to the church and asked instead for a large sum. For 3 years, I heard little of him, except when he wrote me for more money. He will hardly blame me for refusing to comply. But last summer, penniless, Wickham returned to Pemberley for a visit. During his stay, he spent all his time with Georgiana. She was persuaded to believe herself in love, and they left Pemberley to elope. She was then but 15. I found them a day or two before the intended elopement. When she heard all I had to say, she returned with me to Pemberley. I still mourn the hurt in my sister's eyes as we drove away from that man. You may wonder why all of this was not brought to you last night, but I was not then master enough of myself to know what could or ought to be revealed. I will only add, God bless you. Fitzwilliam Darcy.
What does the letter say? Lizzie? Lizzie?
Lydia's trip. The Bennet house, Longbourn. Kitty, Mary, and Lydia are weeping. Lizzie, Jane, and Mr. Bennet are impassive.
Good heaven, what is to become of us? What are we going to do?
Whatever is the matter?
The soldiers leave town today.
How can you be so smiling, Lizzie? Will you not miss Mr. Wickham?
I dare say I shall not.
I remember what I myself endured on similar occasions 25 years ago. I cried for 2 days when Colonel Miller's regiment ran away.
Who is Colonel Miller?
I thought I should have broken my heart.
I've never heard of a Colonel Miller.
I am sure my own heart shall break.
Oh, if one could but go to Brighton.
There are plenty of soldiers in Brighton.
Oh, yes. If one could but go to Brighton. But Papa is so disagreeable.
I don't understand why you all find soldiers so appealing.
Oh, really, Mary? You ought to talk nonsense.
A little sea baiting would set me up forever.
I do not think any of you need to travel to Brighton.
I'm sure it would do me a great deal of good. Papa, if Mrs. Forster asks me to Brighton, may I go?
I cannot see why Mrs. Foster shouldn't ask me as well as Lydia, though I am not her particular friend. I have just as much right to be asked as she has. I am 2 years older.
Be reasonable, girl.
I can't.
I shan't.
Now, Kitty.
Oh, Lydia, you dropped your sewing.
What do you think, Lizzie? A jaunt to Brighton?
It would be the death warrant of common sense. You oughtn't let Lydia go.
I agree, don't let Lydia go.
I don't recall asking your thoughts, Mary. You may adjourn.
Papa, listen to me. In Brighton, Lydia might yet be more imprudent, and the temptations would be greater here than here at home.
Lydia will never be easy until she's exposed herself in some public place or other. We can never expect her to do it with so little expense as under the current circumstances.
If you were fully aware of the situation, I'm sure you would judge differently in the affair.
What? Has she frightened away some of your lovers? Such squeamish words are not worth the regret. Let me see the list of fellows who have been...
The list of pitiful fellows. She has no restraint, Papa. She will at 16 be the most determined flirt that ever made herself or her family ridiculous. She will involve all of us in her disgrace. The laugh of the town, the Bennet sisters.
Oh, do not worry, my love. You will not appear to any less advantage for having a couple of, I may say 3 very silly sisters.
Papa.
Do you not think it true? We shall have no peace at Longbourn if Lydia does not go to Brighton. Let her go then. She is luckily too poor to be the object of prey or prey of anybody.
Papa.
At Brighton, she will be of less importance as a common flirt than she has been here. The officers will find women better worth their notice. Let us hope, therefore, that her being there may teach her her own insignificance. Now, what say you to leaving town, like the soldiers?
I'm sure I don't know what you mean.
Might be nice, you know, to see another part of the country. I hear Pemberley is a beautiful estate.
Pemberley? Mr. Darcy's Pemberley?
Oh, you needn't look so frightened, Lizzie. Mr. Darcy isn't home and shan't be for some time, well, I imagine. Would you like to see his manor?
I'd rather stay here at Longbourn.
I hear he has the most beautiful woods this side of London and a library to rival Alexander's.
And he's not at home?
He's not at home.
Pemberley. Mr. Darcy's residence at Pemberley. It's very beautiful. Statues and paintings litter the space.
Here is the likeness of our steward's son. He is now gone into the army, but I'm afraid he has turned out very wild. And that is my master.
Lizzie, you can tell us whether it is like or not.
Does that young lady know Mr. Darcy?
A little.
And do you not think him a very handsome gentleman, man?
Yes, very handsome.
And is Miss Darcy as handsome as her brother?
Oh, yes, the handsomest young lady that ever was seen, and so accomplished.
Is your master much at Pemberley in the course of the year?
Not so much as I could wish, sir, but I dare say he may spend half his time here. And Miss Darcy is always down for the summer months.
If your master would marry, you might see more of him.
Yes, ma'am, but I do not know when that will be. I do not know who is good enough for him.
It is very much to his credit, I'm sure, that you should think so.
I say no more than the truth, and everybody will say that knows him.
There are very few people of whom so much can be said. You are lucky in having such a master.
If I were to go through the world, I could not meet with a better. Come, let us look at the next room.
Oh, Mr. Darcy.
Miss Bennet.
I do not wish to intrude. Your housekeeper informed us that you would certainly not be here till tomorrow.
I must admit I am surprised to see you in my home.
I will quit it as soon as I can gather my parents.
No need, no need. I am early. I ran before the rest of the party. Among them is one you know, Miss Caroline Bingley.
I see.
There is also another person in the party. Would you do me the honor of meeting my sister?
An introduction at Pemberley. Caroline Bingley, Georgiana, and Mr. Darcy stand in the hall. Lizzie enters.
My dear Lizzie, how long it's been.
Quite long indeed.
My brother and I have sorely missed your family while we've been in town.
I'm sorry to hear that. We have missed your company as well.
Miss Bennet, may I introduce my sister, Georgiana?
Georgiana embraces Lizzie.
It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Darcy. I have heard so much about you.
And are you?
Surely you exaggerate.
Not at all. My brother speaks of you constantly.
Is this true, Darcy?
Constantly. Not constantly.
Well, I feel I already know you in some respects.
I do not expect you to be so tall and handsome.
But my brother is both, is he not?
Yes, he rather is.
Well?
Might I visit your library? I've so longed to see the books here at Pemberley.
Of course, it's down the hall. I will join you in a moment.
How very ill Miss Bennet looks this morning, Mr. Darcy.
Perceive no difference in her appearance?
I must confess that I never could find any beauty in her. Her face is too thin, her complexion has no brilliancy, and her features are not at all handsome.
Perhaps we do not agree on the subject.
I remember when we first knew her, how amazed we all were to find that she was reputed beauty. I recall your saying one night, she a beauty? I should as soon call her mother a wit. But I believe you thought her rather pretty at one time.
That was only when I first saw her. I now consider her one of the handsomest women of my acquaintance.
Oh!
Sir, this has just arrived from Miss Lizzie Bennet. The messenger says it is most urgent.
Let me locate her.
I can find her if you like.
The matter, Miss Bennet?
I have just had a letter from Jane with such dreadful news. My sister Lydia has eloped with Mr. Wickham. They have run away together from Brighton. You know him too well to doubt the rest. She has no money, no connections, nothing.
But is it certain? Absolutely certain?
They left Brighton together on Sunday night and were traced almost to London.
What has been done? What has been attempted to recover her?
My father has gone to London, and Jane has written to beg my uncle's immediate assistance, but I know very well nothing can be done.
If I but warned your family of his caprice, this all might have been prevented.
You mustn't blame yourself, Mr. Darcy. I might have said something to them after your letter.
Excuse me.
Lydia, married, visits. Longbourn. The family is arrayed around the room. Lydia flounces in, displaying her ring finger, which is adorned with a modest but ugly wedding band.
Good gracious, when I went away, I had no idea of being married till I came back again. Though I thought it'd be very good fun if I was.
Lydia!
Oh, Mama, do the people hereabouts know I am married now? I was afraid they might not, and we overtook Mrs. Lucas in her carriage. So I let down the side glass, took off my glove, and let my hand just rest on the window frame so that she might see the ring.
Lydia approaches Jane, who is sitting next to Mrs. Bennet.
Jane, I take your place now, and you must go further because I am a married woman.
Are you out of your mind?
Go sit over there so I might be near Mamma.
I will not move, dear sister.
I am sure my sisters must all envy me now. I only hope you may have half my good luck. You must all go to Brighton. That is the place to get husbands. What a pity it is, Mamma, we did not all go.
If I had my will, we should. But my dear Lydia, I don't like you moving such a way off. Must it be so?
Oh, Lord, yes. You and Papa and my sisters must come down this year. We shall be at Newcastle all the winter, and I dare say there will be some balls, and I will take good care to get partners for them all.
Oh, I should like it beyond anything.
And then, when you go away, you may leave one or two of my sisters behind you. And I dare say I should get husbands for them before the winter is over.
I thank you for my share of the favor, but I do not particularly like your way of getting husbands.
Elizabeth, behave yourself.
Me?
Yes, Lizzie, you're acting abominably. We married women, however, conduct ourselves with comportment.
Oh, and there he is.
My sweet, dear, lovely Mr. Wickham.
Day, Lizzie.
But does he not look fine, my dear husband?
Good day, Mr. Wickham.
He does everything best in the world, does he not? I am sure he will kill more birds on the 1st of September than anybody else in the country.
Quite the accomplishment.
Now, Lizzie, be respectful.
I'm going into town. Do ladies need anything?
I dare say not. Let me see you to the door.
Lizzie, I never gave you an account of my wedding, I believe. You were not by when I told Mamma and the others all about it. Are you not curious to hear how it was managed?
I think there cannot be too little said on the subject.
La, you are so strange, but I must tell you how it went on. We were married, at St. Clement's because Wickham's lodgings were in that parish. All morning I was thinking of my dear Wickham. I longed to know whether he'd be married in his blue coat. And of course, I was worried he might be late, but Mr. Darcy brought him to the church on time.
Mr. Darcy?
Yes, it was his whom I found us outside of London, But gracious, I ought not to have said a word about it.
Mr. Darcy was at your wedding?
Yes, he organised it all. But I ought not to speak more in it. What will Wickham say?
He helped with the arrangements?
Of course, he paid for everything. But do not question me further. It was to be such a secret.
You may depend upon my seeking no further.
Thank you, for if you did, I shall certainly tell you all, and then Wickham would be very angry. And I don't want to anger my dear Mr. Wickham.
Gentlemen callers. Mrs. Bennet enters, taking off her bonnet.
Well, well, I heard in town that Mr. Bingley has come back to Hertfordshire. He is nothing to us, and I'm sure I never want to see him again. But, however, he is very welcome to come to Netherfield if he likes it. And who knows what may happen. Oh, but that is nothing to us.
Don't look at me like that, Lizzie.
I'm not looking at you in any particular way.
I assure you that the news does not affect me. I am glad of one thing, that he comes alone, because we shall see less of him. I dread other people's remarks.
As soon as Mr. Bingley comes, my dear, you'll wait on him, of course.
No. You forced me to visit him last year. If he wants our society, let him seek it. He knows where we live.
Well, all I know is that it'll be abominably rude if you do not wait on him.
Mamma, someone is coming up the drive.
Well, I'm not expecting anyone. Turn them away. Will you, dear?
Mama, it's Mr. Bingley. Mr. Bingley's walking up to the house.
Jane sits.
You cannot be serious.
There is a gentleman with him, Mama. Who can it be?
Some acquaintance or other, my dear? I'm sure I do not know.
Mary goes to the window.
It looks just like the man that used to be with him before. Mr. What's his name? That tall, proud man.
Oh, good gracious! Mr. Darcy! Well, any friend of Mr. Bingley's will always be welcome here, to be sure, but I must say that I just hate the very sight of him. Oh, Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy, how nice to see you both again.
Pleasure is all ours, ma'am.
It is a long time, Mr. Bingley, since you went away.
Yes, it is.
I began to be afraid you'd never come back again, and a great many changes have happened in the neighborhood since you went away. Let's see, Miss Lucas is married and settled, and one of my own daughters, my Lydia. You must have seen it in the papers, though it was put on as it ought to be. I mean, did you see it?
I did. My heartiest congratulations to you all.
It's a delightful thing to be sure to have a daughter well married. But at the same time, Mr. Bingley, it's very hard to have her taken away from me. Do you mean to stay here long?
A few weeks at least for the shooting.
Well, when you've killed all your own birds, Mr. Bingley, I beg you will come here and shoot as many as you please on Mr. Bennet's manor. I'm sure he'll be vastly happy to oblige you.
Is your sister well, Mr. Darcy?
Quite well, thank you.
And yourself?
Also well, thank you.
I'm glad to hear it.
Shall I play us a song?
I'm sure these gentlemen have much to do.
Yes, we must be off.
Oh, Mama.
Excuse you, Mama.
Now that this first meeting is over, I feel perfectly easy. We are only indifferent acquaintances.
Yes, very indifferent indeed. Oh, Jane, take care.
My dear Lizzie, you cannot think me so weak as to be in danger now.
I think you are in very great danger of making him as much in love with you as ever.
Mr. Bingley appears at the door.
Pardon the interruption so soon after leaving.
You are quite pardoned, I'm sure.
May I have an audience with you, Miss Jane Bennet? Alone?
An unexpected visitor. Jane and Lizzie are alone in the sitting room.
He told me that he was totally ignorant of my being in town last spring. I had not believed it possible.
But how did he account for it?
It must have been his sister's doing. She was certainly no friend to his acquaintance with me.
That is the most unforgiving speech that I have ever heard you utter. Good girl.
Would you believe it, Lizzie, that when he went to town last November, he really loved me and believed me indifferent?
He made a mistake, to be sure, but it is to the credit of his modesty.
Oh, if I could but see you as happy, if there were but such another man for you.
If you were to give me 40 such men, I never could be as happy as you. Till I have your disposition, I never can have your happiness. But if I have very good luck, I may meet with another Mr. Collins in time.
Oh, Lizzie.
I'm considering the convent. The last man I flirted with married our sister.
Is there no one else who's caught your eye?
Well, there is someone.
Who is he? Tell me.
You'll laugh at me, Jane. I've been such a fool.
I won't laugh, I promise.
Oh, Jane, I can hardly believe it myself. I think I am in love with...
Girls, there's a carriage outside. Whoever can it be?
Lady Catherine enters in a tornado of skirts.
I hope you are well, Miss Bennet. That lady, I suppose, is your mother?
She is.
And I suppose that is one of your sisters?
Yes, madam.
Oh, she is my eldest. My youngest of all is lately married. Have you heard?
You have a very small park here.
Oh, it is nothing in comparison to Rosine's, my lady, but I assure you it is much larger than some.
This must be a very inconvenient sitting room for the evening in summer. The windows are full west.
We never sit here after dinner.
May I have permission to speak to your daughter, Miss Lizzie Bennet, alone?
Well, of course, your ladyship. I'd be more than happy to oblige. Come, Jane.
You can be at no loss, Miss Bennet, to understand the reason of my journey hither. Your own conscience must tell you why I come.
Indeed, you are mistaken, madam. I'm not able to account for the honor of seeing you here.
Miss Bennet, you ought to know that I am not to be trifled with. But however insincere you may choose to be, you shall not find me so. My character is celebrated for its sincerity.
Yes, ma'am.
A report of the most alarming nature reached me 2 days ago. I was told that Miss Elizabeth Bennet, would soon be united to my nephew, my own nephew, Mr. Darcy. Though I know it must be a scandalous falsehood, I instantly resolved to make my sentiments known to you.
If you believed it impossible, I wonder you took the trouble of coming so far. What could your ladyship propose by it?
To insist upon having such a report universally contradicted.
Your coming to Longbourn to see me and my family will rather be a confirmation of it, if indeed such a report is in existence.
Do you then pretend to be ignorant of it? Has it not been industriously circulated by yourselves?
I never heard any such thing.
And can you likewise declare there's no foundation for such a story?
I do not pretend to possess equal frankness with your ladyship. You may ask questions which I shall choose not to answer.
This is not to be borne, Miss Bennet. Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage?
Your ladyship has declared it to be impossible.
It ought to be so, but your arts and allurements may have made him forget what he owes to himself and to all his family. You may have drawn him in.
If I have, I shall be the last person to confess it.
Oh, Miss Bennet, do you know who I am? Let me be rightly understood. This match to which you have the presumption to aspire can never take place. Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now, what have you to say?
Only this, that if he is, you can have no reason to suppose he will make an offer to me.
Obstinate, headstrong girl. From their infancy, they have been intended for each other. It will not be prevented by a young woman of inferior birth, of no importance in the world. Are you lost to every feeling of propriety and delicacy? I have not been in the habit of brooking disappointment.
That will make your ladyship's situation at present more pitiable, but it will have no effect on me.
This the upstart pretensions of a young woman without family, connections, or fortune. Is this to be endured?
He is a gentleman. I am a gentleman's daughter. So far, we are equal.
But who is your mother? Who are your uncles and aunts? Do not imagine me ignorant of their condition.
If Mr. Darcy does not object to my connections, they can be nothing to you.
Tell me once and for all, are you engaged to him?
I am not.
And will you promise never to enter into such an engagement?
I will make no such promise.
Oh, I shall not go away till you have given me the assurance I require.
And I never shall give it.
Oh, I have by no means done. I am no stranger to the particulars of your youngest sister's infamous elopement. I know it all, that the young man's marrying her was a patched-up embarrassment at the expense of your father and uncles. Heaven and earth! Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted?
You can now have nothing further to say. You have insulted me in every possible method. I must beg your leave.
Unfeeling, selfish girl. I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attention.
Why did Lady Catherine leave without a goodbye?
She did not want to see anyone.
She is a very fine-looking woman, and her calling here was prodigiously civil. She only came, I suppose, to tell us the Collinses were well.
Yes, Mamma, the Collinses are prodigious well.
Lizzie goes on a walk. Longbourn. Lizzie is alone in the garden. Mr. Darcy enters.
Oh, Mr. Darcy.
I had hoped I might take you for a walk. I know how fond you are of walking.
I don't see why not.
Is your mother at home?
She's gone into town. Kitty, Jane, I'm going walking.
We care not what you do.
Thank you for your time.
They stand and walk.
It is a nice day, is it not?
Fine. Fine.
The sun has returned?
Yes, it has. Mr. Darcy, I'm a very selfish creature. I can no longer help thanking you for your kindness to my poor sister Lydia, for all you did to marry her respectably. Let me thank you again and again in the name of all of my family.
You will thank me. Let it be for yourself alone. I thought only of you.
Oh.
You're too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on the subject forever. Have your feelings changed?
I received a visit from your aunt last night.
I heard from Lady Catherine this morning.
And what did she say?
She is most displeased with you.
I do not doubt it.
Her account taught me to hope as I had scarcely ever allowed myself to hope before.
It gave me hope, too, that you might still love me.
But is the prospect of my love not repulsive to you?
Well, Mr. Darcy, let me see.
Lizzie steps closer to Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy steps closer to her. The space between them closes. And they kiss. Fireworks.
Well?
Perhaps you improve with practice?
They kiss again.
Do you forgive me my faults?
If you never forgive mine. Now be sincere. Do you admire me for my impertinence?
The liveliness of your mind, I do.
To be sure, you knew no actual good of me when you fell for me.
Was there no good in your affectionate behaviour to Jane while she was ill at Netherfield?
Dearest Jane, who could have done less for her? But make a virtue of it by all means. What made you so shy of me when you first called here? When you called, why did you look as if you did not care about me?
Because you were grave and silent, and gave me no encouragement.
But I was embarrassed.
And so was I.
You might have talked to me more.
A man who had felt less might.
Shall you ever have courage to announce to Lady Catherine what is to befall her?
I'm more likely to want time than courage, Elizabeth. If you will give me a sheet of paper, it shall be done directly. But first, I must speak with your father.
Send in the clowns. Inside Longbourn.
My dear Lizzie, where can you have been walking to?
I was wandering about.
Alone?
With Mr. Darcy. Jane, we are engaged. He is speaking with Papa at this very moment.
You're joking, Lizzie. This cannot be. Engaged to Mr. Darcy.
He still loves me, and we are engaged.
Oh, Lizzie, it cannot be. I know how much you dislike him.
Perhaps I did not always love him so well as I do now, but in cases as these, a good memory is unpardonable. This is the last time I shall ever remember it myself.
My dear Lizzie, I do congratulate you, but are you certain? Forget the question. Are you quite certain that you can be happy with him?
It is settled between us already that we are to be the happiest couple in the world. But are you pleased, Jane? Shall you like to have such a brother?
Nothing could give either Bingley or myself more delight. But we considered it. We talked of it as impossible. Will you tell me how long you've loved him?
It has been coming on so gradually that I hardly know when it began. I felt the first change when he wrote to me about Wickham.
He writes to you, Lizzie?
He has written me one letter.
A love letter?
A letter of explanation. And do you know what he has done for Lydia?
Are you out of your senses to be accepting this man? Have not you always hated him?
I was mistaken.
Well, in other words, you're determined to have him. He is rich, to be sure, and you may have more fine clothes and fine carriages than Jane, but will they make you happy?
Have you any other objection than your belief of my indifference?
None at all. We all know him to be a proud, unpleasant sort of man, but this would be nothing if you really liked him.
I do like him. I love him. You do not know what he really is.
I have given him my consent, but my child, let me not have the grief of seeing you unable to respect your partner in life. You know not what you are about.
I do know, Papa. He is the kindest man I know. Has he told you what he did for Lydia?
How, Lydia? Oh, I dare say not.
He rode to London, Papa, the moment I told him of Lydia's predicament. He was the one who discovered Wickham and convinced him to marry Lydia. He paid for everything. He made up the match, gave the money, paid the fellow's debts, and got him his commission.
You didn't tell me, Lizzie.
He wanted it to remain secret. But if I am to carry his name, I want his goodness known.
If this be the case, he deserves you. I could not have parted with you, my Lizzie, for anyone less worthy.
Thank you, Papa. Thank you.
Is it true, Lizzie? Is it true? I thought you hated him.
Can I play your pianoforte at Pemberley?
Good gracious! Lord bless me! Oh, only think, dear me, Mr. Darcy? Who would have thought it? And is it really true? Oh, my sweetest Lizzie, how rich and how great you will be! Such a charming man, so handsome, so tall. Oh, my dear Lizzie, pray apologize for my having disliked him so much before. I hope he will overlook it. Oh, 3 daughters married, 10,000 a year. Oh, Lord, what will become of me? I shall go distracted.
If any young men should come from area, Kitty, send them in. I'm quite a pleasure.
Thank you for watching Pride and Prejudice.
Thank you all so much for watching. That has been our show. But all of the performers, actors would like to take their final bow. So if you can hold on for us one more minute, we've been through Pride, Prejudice, and technological craziness. So we'll have our actors take their final bow. So we have the narrator, Carly Palestina, Mr. Collins, Michael Lake, Lady Diane Keogh, Mrs. Bennet, Mame Coder, Mr. Bennet, Jack Sennett, Mary Bennet, Georgiana Darcy, Nish Singh, Kitty Bennet, Becky Ekagare, sorry Becky, I love you anyway. Lydia Bennet, Charlotte Lucas is played by Sabrina Allen, Caroline Bingley, Mr. Wickham, Julia Saunders, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Judy Schindler, Mr. Bingley, Emiko Okaga, Jane Bennet, Erica Burns, Mr. Darcy, Jordan Marr, Lizzie Bennet, Hira Ismail, the director and producer, Jessica Chen, the stage manager, Abi Anderson, and me, Clara Richards, the executive producer. Thank you all for coming. I hope you had a good time. Sorry Zoom was doing its thing, but we got it done. Have a good night.